Welcome to Rusty Rail's Railfanning Special. On September 7th, 2025, we made a trip to Pennsylvania for the East Broad Top Railroad. Pulling the train that day was a locomotive number 16, one of their 282 Mikado-style locomotives. During this video, we will be getting some run-bys, a train ride behind locomotive number 16, and the shop complex tour. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as locomotive number 16 prepares for the day. Locomotive number 16 pulls the train into the station. We rode the first train of the day, which was at 10:30, and we opted for the shop tour right afterwards. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the train ride and shop tour.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, and welcome aboard the 10:30 a.m. departure of the historic East Broad Top Railroad. My name is Al, I'll be one of the brakemen aboard the train. Joining me on the train is our brakeman Ray, as well as our conductor Dale. Up on the engine we have fireman Brad and Nevin, as well as engineer Courtney. Before we get underway, we have a few important safety guidelines that we ask for you to follow. Please keep all hands, arms, legs, children, and spouses inside the train cars at all times. Moving between the train cars, as well as standing on the end platforms while the train is in motion, is strictly prohibited. Additionally, do your best to keep those aisleways clear, as your train crew will be through to collect your tickets after we get underway. Now, folks, we'll be getting underway in just a few moments, so please join me in letting Conductor Dale know that we are all aboard. would collect your tickets. Thank you, sir.
Your ticket.
Thank you, please. Now, sir, we'll put your ticket for you. You don't claim her at all.
Yes.
There you are, sir. You don't claim him at all. They're okay. Make sure of that. There you go. Right.
No, you better not. What is that?
Christine. Eddie just left.
Where's my seat, Bill? Where's my seat?
Folks, as we travel back to Rockville Furnace, we'll be pausing so you can enjoy the scenery of the beautiful Logwood Valley, as well as the sights and sounds of steam power in action. Our crew will be making their way through the train, so feel free to stop us with any questions.
Yeah. That's what I actually, you said, I don't know. All I give is a
Sir, will you be taking a ride on the Rockville Television or guided tour here today? Okay.
folks, we'll be making a brief stop here and through lines and switch off the main line and to enter another Y, allowing us to turn the train around once more before we return back to the station. Soon we'll also stop at the Rock Hill Trolley Museum for passengers with trolley tickets as well as wishing to partake in a guided tour to disembark. If you plan to leave the train at the Rock Hill Trolley Museum or for a guided tour, please wait until the step boxes are down before exiting the train, and be sure to take all personal belongings with you. For those continuing on to the Orbison station, remain on board the train, and we'll be moving again shortly. If you're leaving us at the Trolley Museum, thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the rest of your time at the historic East Broad Top Railroad.
iron furnaces for the iron. But they would take coal like this and literally bake it. And that's what was left there for the baking process. And that would be used to melt iron.
Does it burn hotter?
Yes,
afterwards?
it burns hotter, yes. And that's iron ore. Okay, and this was the other commodity that the railroad hauled the most of, and that is ganister. And it was used in Mount Union to make fire brick. There were 3 large fire brick plants in Mount Union. All of the steel mills, all of the iron furnaces at that time were lined with fire brick. And of the 5 largest fire brick plants in the world, 3 of them were in Mount Union. Because we have a lot of ganister rock right here. If you're driving around in the area and you look up on the hillside, you see an outcropping of stone with no trees. What you're looking at is probably ganister. Okay. You here for the tour? Okay, good enough. 4, 6, 7. Okay, quick history of the railroad. And believe me, this is going to be quick. This touches only on the highlights. Railroad started in 1850. It was chartered in 1856, but they didn't start construction on the railroad until 1872. They had that minor social hiccup in the middle called the Civil War, and that kind of held up production, construction of the railroad. But in 1872, they started here in Mount Union, and they had track laid to Orbezonia by 1873. By 1874, they were all the way up to Robertsdale. Robertsdale was the goal of the railroad because there was a lot of coal up there, and they were building an iron furnace right here in Rock Hill. And if you ride the trolley, you'll go right past. Let's see. Corner of this building is the only thing that's left of the iron furnace. But that gives you a good view of what it looked like. Opened up in the 1870s, started making iron. They were producing maybe 100 tons of iron per week. Yeah, it was a big modern facility. The railroad actually has gone through 4 phases. The first phase was when they were hauling coal off the mountain to Rock Hill to the iron furnace. That lasted until 1908. The ironworks closed down at that point in time, and the railroad shifted its focus from bringing coal here to Rock Hill to taking coal to Mount Union, where they would transfer it to the Pennsylvania Railroad and could be shipped anywhere in the country. The transfer of that freight was the thing that killed most of the narrow gauge railroads. East Broad Top is narrow gauge, means the rails are only 36 inches apart. Standard gauge is 4 feet 8.5 inches apart. The reason the railroad, the East Broad Top, was able to survive until 1956 was because they had licked the transfer costs of freight. That's what killed most of the narrow gauge railroads. The way they did it was, first of all, the coal was their most important commodity, and their cleaning plant was in Mount Union, right here. If you're mining coal, you have to get it out of the ground, you have to clean it, and then ship it. And what the East Broad Top did was hauled coal to Mount Union and cleaned it there in Mount Union, where the railroad interfaced with the Pennsylvania Railroad. And the yard in Mount Union was a dual gauge track. We have an example of that right outside here. But there were 3 rails, so both narrow gauge and standard gauge equipment could operate in the yard. So they would haul the coal in to clean, and after it was clean, they could dump it into whatever size hopper car it was scheduled to go out on. So that eliminated transfer costs on coal. The transfer costs for the rest of their freight were taken care of in a rather unique fashion. In Mount Union, there was a structure called the timber transfer. It was an overhead gantry system that allowed the railroad to lift an entire carload of logs. There was a logging industry up here on Black Log Mountain. They hauled the logs to Mount Union and pulled it under the timber transfer. The chain would come down, go around the entire load, lift it up in one lift, then slide it to the side and put it down in a standard gauge car. Okay, so there were no transfer costs for timber. 1928, though, the timber industry folded, and this structure sat vacant. It just sat there. Didn't use it until 1932, when somebody came up with the right idea that if you pulled a box car underneath the timber transfer, dropped the chain down, hooked it onto the front coupler, and you could lift the front end of a loaded box car up off the trucks. The only thing that holds the wheels on the freight car is a pin. And when you lift the car up, you separate the two. Roll the trucks out, roll a set of narrow gauge trucks underneath, set it down on top, drift the car forward, do the same thing in the back. And now you can take that standard gauge car on narrow gauge tracks, and you didn't have to move the contents of the car. So that allowed them to haul standard gauge freight on the narrow gauge line, and allowed them to continue until 1956. In 56, the bottom kind of fell out of the coal market. Railroads were going away from steam, going to diesel. Industry was getting away from stationary steam engines and going to gas, natural gas and oil as a heat source. When that happened, the railroad couldn't compete and they shut down. That was the end of the second phase. The third phase, after they shut down, the railroad was sold to a scrap dealer from Indiana, Pennsylvania. His name was Nick Kowalczyk, Kowalczyk Salvage Company. He bought the railroad in 1956, and Nick made his millions scrapping railroads. But for some reason, he did not scrap this railroad. He didn't scrap any of the railroad. He let it sit dormant for about 4 years, and in 1960 opened it up as a tourist line on 4 miles of track. He operated it as a tourist railroad from 1960 until 2011. 2011, they had to shut down because they lost their last steam locomotive. Ridership was falling off. The buildings needed a lot of work as far as repairs are concerned, so did the track, and it was just too expensive for the family to handle, so they shut the railroad down. And then it lay dormant for the next 9 years, at which time on St. Valentine's Day, 2020, it was announced that the railroad had been sold to a nonprofit group that owns it today, the East Broad Top Foundation. Now, this was a group of people who looked at the railroad and decided it was worth saving, and they wanted to get in on that. The board of directors for the foundation are all railroad people who knew what they were getting into. There's a former president of Norfolk Southern, or a CEO of Norfolk Southern on the board. There's a guy that owns about 3 railroads, one in the Midwest and a couple in Europe. He's on the board. That's the type of people that bought the railroad. So they knew what they were getting into, and in 2020, they purchased the railroad, and we started, and what you see here today is a result of that purchase. Most of the repairs that you see in the buildings, all of the track that has been rebuilt, has happened since 2020. There are 2 groups that have been instrumental in this. One is the foundation, of course. They're providing money and the backing. But then there's also another group called the Friends of the East Broad Top, group of volunteers that support the railroad. Most of the restoration that you see today has been done by the Friends. In 2020, I'm a member of all of the tour guides are members of the Friends. We're all volunteers, and we're here just because we enjoy doing this. That's enough about the Friends. I'm running out of, I've spent enough time. It's time to go look at some stuff. What we're going to do with the tour, we'll leave here, we'll go out into the yard, we'll take a look at some rolling stock. From there, we'll go to the roundhouse, and see a couple of the locomotives and the M1. And then from there, we'll get down to the machine shop, and that's where the overhead belt system is, and take a look at the machine shop and the repair facilities there. That's where the tour will end. It will take about an hour. Okay? Any questions? That's the other thing. If you have any questions along the way, please ask. I mean, I can stand up here and talk, but I'd much rather be answering questions that people have than just spouting off information. Yes?
I have a question. In the machine shop, where we be seeing an iron mule by any chance?
An iron mule.
It's like a steam-powered, like, winch, sort of. It's used to pull heavy things.
No, as far as I know, there is nothing there like that. I haven't. No, I haven't seen any. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's go. I said that all the tracks are not using dual gauge. That's an example of a dual gauge track. There's 3 rails, and you can operate both kinds of both narrow gauge and standard gauge on the same rails. What we have here is a boxcar from the Pennsylvania Railroad. It was donated to the railroad here a couple years ago. We're in the process of doing some restoration work on it, and it is sitting on narrow gauge trucks. Okay, so eventually, after we get the restoration completed, then that'll be part of our photo tree.
So how will they get that transferred over since it doesn't continue?
Oh, well, it can go the other way.
Go the other way.
And there are, this track used to go, there was a switch that brought it together. And so I would not be surprised if the next couple of years that gets put back in. These right here, these 2 tracks were here. That's about the only track in the whole yard that's rebuilt. These 2 tracks, well, actually it goes that way for another 100 yards, but that's the only thing that hasn't been rebuilt.
Yeah, definitely there's a lot changed. The last time I was here, it was right before it shut down. Back in probably 2010, 2011.
There's a lot more weeds there. As you can see, standard gauge, narrow gauge freight cars. The narrow gauge is about 3/4 size. If you put that, when you put that standard gauge boxcar on narrow gauge trucks, the only real problem you had, of course, was stability. Okay, and they did some adjustments on the trucks to account for that. But the other thing is that the couplers are different sizes, so they didn't match up. So that is an aluminum adapter that they designed and built here, and they hang it in one coupler and allows you to hook the narrow gauge up to this back door. The East Broad Top was the only narrow gauge railroad in the country that went to an all-steel freight fleet. Everybody else had a combination of wood and steel cars. But we went to an all-steel freight fleet, and our president in the early 1900s, and his name is Siebert. President Siebert wanted this railroad to be as self-sufficient as possible, and to carry that out, they bought a few hopper cars that they liked the design, and after that they quit buying them and started making them. And all the freight cars that you see sitting here were actually made on the property. In the machine shop over here, they were turning out, in the 1920s, they were turning out a new freight car, about one car every 8 days. Wow. And for a railroad that is located 4 miles north of the middle of nowhere in central Pennsylvania, that's quite a feat. This actually gives you the best overall view of the entire complex. This is our newest addition. It was a monument that was dedicated a couple weeks ago. A monument to the Kowalczyk family, Joe and his wife, Nick and his wife. Joe is his son, and he's still involved with the railroad. But this is a picture of Nick Kowalczyk and his wife. They're the ones that bought the railroad originally and then operated it for about 50 years, and they literally saved the railroad. The monument is a drive wheel off locomotive. These more top locomotives. But that was dedicated about 2 weeks ago. But as you're standing here, you can see most of the structures. The station over here was built in 1906 and replaced a much smaller structure that was there before that. A lot of the houses in Rock Hill were company-owned houses. They were owned by the railroad and for railroad employees to live in. The yellow house over here was actually the superintendent's house. It's now a bed and breakfast. The station, the superintendent's house, all of the repair facilities, things like that's up on the hills, now the American Legion. And it was originally the president's house. There have been a bunch of additions on that have changed the look on the outside. But that's where the president lived. And all of those structures on electricity and steam heat from the repair shops. Start at 7 o'clock in the morning and go till 11 o'clock at night when they shut the close the boiler, the shops down, and turn the electricity off and bank the fires until the next morning. But even electricity from 7 to 11 was a lot more than everybody else had been doing. Steam lines underground, yes. Right. The roundhouse is an 8-stall roundhouse. It started out as wood and 4 stalls and has been enlarged several times. 8 stalls. The shed roof on the end, which houses our machine shop today, at one point in time was the bus garage. In the 1920s, the railroad had a bus line that connected Hagerstown, Maryland with Altoona and State College, Pennsylvania. Okay, and they kept the buses here. The one-story brick building over there is the paint shop. That's the 3rd paint shop that's been on the property. First 2 were made out of wood and they burned down. So now we have a brick one that's lasted a good while. The stone house that you see over there is the only building on the property that predates the railroad. When the railroad started construction on this property, it was a farm. That's where the farmer lived. We don't know when that building was built, but we have seen tax records for that building dating back to 1790. So we know it was built before that. Upstairs was used for storage for spare parts. This conglomeration of buildings over here is what sets the East Blood Top apart from all the other British railroads. According to the Smithsonian, we have the most complete example of a steam-powered railroad anywhere in the country because our equipment is all original, the track is all original, and the shops are complete. 2 years ago, drive wheel cracked on number 16 and they took it out of service while they had the drive wheel replaced. So they had to start from scratch and they had to have somebody forge a wheel for them and then machine it and then put it back on the locomotive. It took about a year to get that done. Okay. If that had happened in 1952, when the shops were operating, when the railroad was still operating, the locomotive might have been down for a month or 2. Because they would have built the wheel right here. But today we have everything to do that with, but we can't do it because of insurance, ocean, and all that kind of stuff. Okay? All right. would like to have you do is walk to the front of locomotive number 12, which is right here. Go around the front of that locomotive into the area between 12 and number 18. Okay? If you remember over there in the freight house, at the end of my spiel, I was kind of fumbling around like I forgot what I was saying. And that's because I had forgot what I was saying and skipped some information that you need. First of all, you are perfectly welcome to take all the pictures you want. You've been in museums where they say don't take pictures. Well, this isn't a place like that. There are things that they don't want you to photograph, but we don't have to worry about that because we're not going anywhere near them. Okay, so take all the pictures that you want. The other thing is, you've been in places where they say don't touch. Well, we say the same thing, but for slightly different reasons. Guaranteed, if you grab a hold of that locomotive, you're not going to break it. Okay, but your hands are probably going to come away dirty. And as you notice, I walked in, the first thing I did was put gloves on, because if I don't, when I come out of here, my hands are black too. So if you come out of here with dirty hands, don't say you weren't warned. Okay? What we have here are two of our original steam locomotives. This is number 12. It is one of our named locomotives. This is named Millie after Joe Cavalci's daughter, Millie. Millie was new from the Baldwin Locomotive Shop in Philadelphia. It's a Mikado class locomotive, which refers to as the configuration of the drive wheels. It has a set of pilot wheels up front, it has 8 drive wheels in the middle, and a set of trailing trucks under the firebox in the back. All the Mikados have that wheel configuration. All of our locomotives are Baldwin Mikados. They were all bought new from Baldwin and delivered here. This is the only place they've ever operated. Excuse me. Millie is the oldest. It arrived here in 1911 and was an immediate hit with the railroad because it was much more powerful than anything else that they had. This locomotive could pull 15 empty hopper cars to the top of the mountain. It's very easy to get coal off the mountain. All you need is air brakes and nerve to bring a load of coal down the mountain. But you need power to get the empties up to the top, and you have to have them up there in order to get them filled. So this one would haul more empties up than any of the previous locomotives. So it was very popular, and they immediately started buying more. This Millie arrived in 1911. She weighed in at 56 tons, okay, and was the first of 6 that were purchased. 12, 14, 15 are all saturated steam locomotives, meaning the steam goes through the boiler one time, okay, and they were rated at 15 empties to the mountain, top of the mountain. 16, 17, and 18 are superheated. They are a lot larger locomotives. Superheated steam goes through the boiler 2 or 3 times and is much hotter and more efficient operating. They were more powerful. 18 is our largest locomotive. It's also our newest one. It arrived here in 1920, weighs in at 85 tons, and was rated at pulling 22 empties to the top of the mountain. Okay. Questions about locomotives?
How much track do we
I'm sorry, I don't have that figure. I have it on my chart, and you asked me, I started to reach for my cheat sheet, and I realized it's laid over on the desk. I'm sorry. Okay. What I would like to do now is give you a few minutes to walk around, take a look at the locomotives, ask any questions, take all the pictures you want. I do have some restrictions that I have to give you as far as movement is concerned. You're allowed to go in front of the locomotive, but please don't go past the front of number 18. And back through here, please don't go past the back of the locomotives. That part of the roundhouse, they're working over there. There's exposed inspection pits. They really don't want people over there for that reason. And in the back, you get behind the locomotives, there is inspection pits there. They're pretty close. Okay, so go ahead, take a few minutes, look around, and then we'll gather over here at the end. Foundation has plans to restore all 6 of our steam locomotives. We'll probably never see all 6 of them operating at the same time, but because by the time they get the last one restored, it'll be time to start over again on 16. So you probably won't ever see 6 of them operating, but the plans are to restore all 6. Number 18 here hasn't operated since 1956. It's the only locomotive that never hauled force.
What's the rough time it takes something this size to, like, from go from cold, like being cold and fired up and ready to move?
At least 8 hours.
8 hours.
Yeah. And actually, they would, and that would be pushing it. Usually, they would take 24 though.
Especially wintertime, it's cold too.
Yeah.
It's cold.
The most frequent question I get about steam locomotives, how much do they cost? How much do they cost? I don't have the figures for all of the locomotives, but I do know the ones for number 16. And you'll see why I know them real quick. Number 16 arrived here on June 16th, 1916, at a cost of, you guessed it, $16,000. Yes. But that translates to about 400,000 today. And the other thing that you have to remember is in 1916 they were building a lot of steam locomotives, so the price was a lot. They were a lot more.
They already had manufactured
Yeah.
parts.
Okay. Steam locomotives are beautiful. I would never say anything against them. They're what bring people here. But when you get right down to it, the real gem of their collection is the M1 that's sitting right behind it. It is a combination gas electric self-propelled vehicle. It has up front a 6-cylinder, an inline 6-cylinder aluminum block, 250 horsepower, water-cooled aircraft engine. Okay. It powers a generator in the second compartment, creates electricity that powers the 4 traction motors. There's a traction motor on each of the 4 axles. That's what moves the car. Largest compartment is here. It's a freight compartment, and in the back there's seating for 12 people. This machine came here with one purpose, and that was to save the mail contract for the railroad. There is a clause in the postal regulations that says if you're going to haul mail on a railroad, it has to be hauled on a scheduled passenger train. Cannot be hauled on a freight train, because we all know that mail has to go through on a timely manner, and freight trains are known to stop and wait for other things. So it has to be on a scheduled passenger train. And it was very difficult for the East Broadtop and other short line railroads to maintain passenger service. But they wanted to keep that mail contract. It was consistent. It wasn't their largest contract, but it was the most consistent one they had. They knew every month they were getting a check from the federal government for hauling mail, and they wanted to keep that. So they went to the Brill Company, the company that builds streetcars in Philadelphia, and they asked them to build a combination gas electric for us. Brill was building combination gas electrics for standard gauge railroads, built a lot of them. We asked them to build one for us, they wouldn't do it. They said no, because we were narrow gauge. And they would have had to change all their manufacturing procedures, build in one car, and it's the only one they'd ever sell, because in 1928, we were the only narrow gauge operating east of the Mississippi. So they said no. They did some more talking, and they came up with a compromise. The compromise was Brill gave the East Broadtop a stack of blueprints, a bunch of parts, and said, build it yourself. And that's exactly what we did. This was built in our shops in 1928, or 1927 and 28. In 1928, it went into service, and it has been in service ever since. It operates about one day a month. They'll bring in the M1 out, and they'll run rides on the M1. If you ever get a chance to get a ticket for the M1, I would suggest that you do that. It's a neat experience riding this. And like I said, it's the gem of our collection, because it's the only narrow gauge combination gas electric that was ever built anywhere in the world. This is one of a kind.
Surprised you just didn't build it regular and then just give it to you guys, like here you can figure out how to change the track size.
Yeah. But it was actually built for, they changed the specs and brought it down to 3/4 size, and that's what they built.
So like I said, pretty much like bought the blueprint ideas for the rest of the car itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brill didn't give us anything. We purchased
the blueprint crates.
Yeah.
And just had to come up with your own designs for the track.
Yep. Okay. Then the really neat thing about this car, as far as I'm concerned, is the motor. It has a 6-cylinder gasoline engine up front. And if you remember, I said it was an aluminum block, inline, water-cooled aircraft engine. Most aircraft engines are rotary, and they're also air-cooled, okay? But this one is an inline 6 with water-cooled, and that's because of the type of aircraft that it was built to service. It was supposed to go in a blimp. During World War I, Brill was trying to get a defense contract for building motors for blimps, okay, for the dirigibles. So they had to build a bunch of motors, and then they submitted their bid, and somebody else got the bid. So now they're stuck with all these blimp motors. What do you do with them? You put them in your combination gas electrics. So this thing has been operating since 1928 on a World War I era blimp motor. It's never been out of the machine, and it still operates today.
You're running to your local auto parts store for parts for that.
How
Well,
many liters is that motor?
I'm not sure. It's 6 cylinders, develops 250 horsepower. I've never heard anybody say anything about the displacement.
Oh man,
Okay.
it's huge.
Yeah, the only restoration we've actually done on this thing is 2 years ago we put a new roof on it. Okay, questions? All right, let's head for the machine shop. Yes, it does. There's a story behind that too. What happened was in the original plan, in 14 was supposed to be the second locomotive that was restored. And they started carrying it apart, okay, in advance of any restoration work. And they found a lot more problems with the undercarriage, with the wheels and axles than they thought they were going to get into. And it became apparent that 15 was actually going to be easier to do. So they wanted to get 2 locomotives in as quick as they could, so they just switched the order.
I used to work for, I used to be a welder for a quick company.
Yeah. Turntables, the third turntable has been on the property. This one actually came from the New York Central Railroad. They outgrew it, but it works pretty well for us. It was installed in 1911 when they got milling, and it's 65 feet long, and it is a certified Armstrong turntable. When it arrived, there was an air compressor motor, if you will, that you hook the turntable up to the air compressor on the locomotive, and that would turn the turntable. That mechanism wore out. It's actually over the weeds behind the stone house, and what they did was they put a pipe on each end, and now you turn it from here. And if you have an 85-ton, actually 16, now 84 tons locomotive, and you put it on that turntable, and you have a guy on either end. If it's balanced properly, two guys can turn the turntable with an 85-ton locomotive. If they don't have it balanced properly, doesn't matter if you have 200 guys pushing on it, it's not going to move. But that is, in fact, you folks are fortunate that you were here this weekend, because we're operating with steam this weekend. Next weekend, there's going to be diesel, and the reason that is happening is because they're going to replace the deck on the turntable starting tomorrow. And after when they do that, they won't be able to get the engines out of the roundhouse. So that's why we're going to diesel next week. But that will get a new deck starting on Monday. Okay. Questions? All right. What? Oh, you are? Oh, you want to stick around here? No, I think that you know that the machine shop is see. Okay. All right. Thank you. As I said over in the freight office, much of the restoration is done by the Friends of the East Broad Top. And this is a very good example of what we do around here. There were 3-story buildings here that had spare parts in them. This one was in the worst shape, that one was second, and the small one was deemed to be in the best shape. So when we undertook the restoration, we did this one first. This building was in such bad shape and it sunk. There's well over 25 tons of spare parts on the shelves inside that building, and it caused the building to sink to the point that we couldn't open this window because ground level was about right there. It was the sill was actually below ground level. So we jacked it up. We had a professional company come in, jack the building up. They poured a foundation and a floor under it, and then we replaced the corners and set it back down, and then we did the rest of the restoration. That part has been completed. We moved on to the next building. That's the current project that they're working on, and the small shed over here will be done as soon as this one's completed. Okay. But that's the kind of work that's the kind of restoration work that the Friends are involved in. The square building over here is the sand house. Bottom floor has a furnace. Top floor is where they store the sand. What they use the sand for is they fill a sand dome on the steam locomotives, and then when the engineer needs a little more traction, pulls a lever, drops sand down either in front of or in back of the wheels, and gives him more traction in front of or in back of the wheels, depending on which way he's trying to go. Okay. The water pipe that's right here was just brought into service a couple weeks ago. Up until then, if we wanted to fill the water in the tender for the steam locomotive, we had to use the fire hydrant and the 2-inch hose. It took us about 45 minutes to fill the tender. With the water pipe in place and the water and the system restored, we can do it in about 3 minutes. A lot more water coming out of there than out of the fire hydrant. Yeah, there's a reservoir up here on the ridge, and that's all gravity flow. Okay. All right. Actually, first tour I did, I wasn't leading the tour actually, I was doing what we call herding cats. It was a large group and I was just brand new. I'm trying to keep everybody together. And they came by here and the guide really didn't say a whole lot about that bunch of parts. And a woman that was in the tour kind of tapped me on the shoulder and says, "You guys really ought to clean that up. It really looks bad there." I assured her that I would let the proper people know about that situation. What that is raw material for spare parts. The building there is a forge. And they would take those pieces that they have there. Now the drive wheel that you see would have to be broken up a little bit more. But they would put them into the furnace, melt them down, pour them into sand molds to make new parts. Which is why when number 16 broke his drive wheel, we could have had it repaired in a couple months here because we had the capability of making a new wheel. Okay. In fact, whenever that happened, they went into the pattern room and they got the mold for the drive wheels for 16 out. We couldn't use it because something had got in there and chewed on it. So they had to have a new mold made. But we had the original mold, but it wasn't usable. Okay. Now we're going to go into the machine shop. When you go in there, first thing I'm sure you'll notice will be the overhead belt system. All of the machines in the machine shop were belt driven off that overhead belt system, and that belt system is operational today. They don't have it fired up today, but they can use it, and they do use it about once a month. They'll fire that up and do demonstrations for people. Okay, so take a look as you go in, and we'll gather over here at the boilers and start talking about the machine shop. Oh, the floor is perfectly safe, but there's a trap door right here, and when you step on it, it rattles. Don't let that throw you. I have elementary kids come here, and it scares them. I tell them we could have elephants tap dance on this trap door. Wouldn't. But this is what sets the East Broad Top apart. This repair facility right here. It is complete. They ran this up until 1960. Railroad closed in 56, but they had custom work they were doing for other companies, so the shops actually ran until about 1960, at which time they just locked the doors and went home. And it sat idle until 2020 when they started doing some real restoration work in here. Power came from these two Babcock and Wilcox boilers that are right here behind me. They provided steam that powered the stationary steam engine right here. stationary steam engine is one of the oldest pieces in the shop. In fact, there is evidence that this actually predates the Civil War. It's been around for that long. It only has 12 moving parts in the whole motor. Connected to a 7.5-foot flywheel that goes up to the main shaft. Then off the main shaft, there are other shafts that operate throughout the building. In this shop, in the machine shop, there's 3 shafts. There's 2 shafts over in the boiler shop. There's a shaft in the car shop over here. Actually, in the blacksmith shop and in the foundry, there are things that run off the belt system. The belt power goes through the other 2 buildings as well.
So is it like a collect system, or like they can engage which ones they needed, or they all just run all the time no matter what?
Well, when you fired I'll tell you what, your timing is great. When you fired up the stationary steam engine, the shafts started turning and all the belts in the place started turning at the same time. But the machines weren't operating because they had idler tools. Right here, this is a press. We're pressing wheels on and off freight axles, okay? And when we've taken the belt off of this one because I use it for demonstration several times a day. But the belt would have come from the overhead belt shaft down to here in this idler pulley. When they turned that on, the belt would start turning and the idler pulley would start turning. The power is going to the machine, but it's in neutral. Okay. So in order to engage the pumps that activate the press, you had to move this lever, which moved the belt over to the drive pulley here. And when this one starts turning, things start happening. Okay, the machine starts operating. Okay, and all of the machines in here operate the same way. They have a belt system and there's an idler pulley connected to that machine. Now, we don't have all of them hooked up. We have belts to hook them all up, but we don't have them all hooked up at the present time because of safety concerns. Okay, but they all have the same idea of an idler pulley. Most of them have the idler pulley on the machine. Some of them don't have an idler pulley on the machine, but they do have one up on the shaft. So there is an idler pulley associated with each machine. Okay. Now, as I said, this is the machine shop. Everything in here was designed, over in that area, was designed to change the shape of a piece of steel or iron. Okay, there are drills and planes and things like that over there. Okay, right in through here, these machines were designed for working on wheels, both locomotive and freight wheels. Okay, let's go back this way. These are the machines there. These are the wheels, what they worked on, freight wheels, pressing them on and off the axles. This was an axle lathe for truing up the axles. This worked on brake cylinders, and a wheel boring machine to bore the center of the new wheel out. And the last machine is it's a lathe for turning locomotive wheels.
Like the surface, like they would turn the face, like the face on the
Yeah,
surface for the track.
The locomotives have a cast iron wheel with a tire, with a tire on it, and the tire was what they would be working with here. Okay. This is the boiler shop over here. The boiler shop works on plate steel. They can handle anything up to 1/2 inch thick. There are shears for cutting it. There are punches for putting holes in it for rivets. There are rollers to bend it. They actually made the smokestacks for the boilers were made over here in the boiler shop. They rolled them in complete circle, matched up the boiler holes, and then hand riveted them together. I'm glad I was not the guy that was working on that ladder. They'd put a ladder up the inside of the smokestack, and you go up there with a sledgehammer and give back pressure on the rivets as they were pounding them in.
And if you were smart, hopefully you had enough con in your ear.
Yeah, because even if you did, first thing that you said when you came out of that tunnel, out of that tube at the end of the day was, huh? Because you couldn't hear a thing. This is the locomotive repair shop here. This is where they would have done all the locomotive repairs and rebuilds on locomotives. There's two tracks. The track on the right is the hot track. There's a smoke jack there so you can pull a hot locomotive in and do any repairs that you needed to on that. If you were doing an extensive rebuild or major repairs to that locomotive and you wanted to drop the fire, then you would bring it in on the cold track on the other side. When you compare the repair facilities, locomotive repair facilities to our modern healthcare system, number 14 is sitting in the emergency room, and the extended care unit over here is waiting for a patient.
So would they bring a cold one in that side, just push it in? Since
Yes,
there's
they
no-
do use a switcher
Okay.
and push it in, yes. Yep. Okay. Over here, they have a roped off today, I guess there's some work going on over there, is the car shop. That's where they built all the freight cars. Okay. Questions? Okay, then what I want to do is turn you loose like we did in the roundhouse. You're free to walk around, take a look at anything. If you have any questions, please ask. As far as movement restrictions, don't cross the rope. Okay, as you see, it's got the inspection pits.
Don't be a dope. Don't cross the rope.
Okay, and the other thing is don't leave the building. Okay, but you're welcome to wander any place, take pictures of whatever you want to. And if you have questions, please ask.
So what was the emery build used for?
It was used to sharpen tools, as a grinder, you know, whatever they needed to. So it's a whetstone actually. This one they filled with water. So there's a drain.
I learned pretty much everything I know from you.
D.L. Richards, shot
You gather here at the door.
Can you tell us anything about D.L. Richards, the shop foreman?
Excuse me, what?
The shop foreman.
Yeah. Richard.
Yeah. Is there any history about him?
I don't know. He was, I do know that he was the last shop foreman that was working here in 1960.
Oh wow.
Okay. One question, I know this is probably, I know the answer to this question, I'm gonna ask you. You're not from Hawaii, are you? I know he's not. But Hawaiians don't talk like that. But,
I'm not from Canada either, eh?
but no, the reason I ask is I'm a member of the Friends of the East Broad Top. We're always looking for new members, okay? And I wanted to invite you, if you have an interest, to join us. Cost of membership is $35 a year, and what you get for that is a subscription to our magazine, The Timber Transfer, which comes out 4 times a year. I just got my fall issue yesterday. And then every month we get a digital newsletter, and the newsletter keeps you informed as what's going on around here. This month's newsletter, I think, has 24 pages. Last month's had 19, and then halfway through the month we got another 19-page edition. So, you know, and they didn't, there wasn't one spot in any of those newsletters where they asked you for more money or to do anything. They are simply, you know, keeping you informed as to what's going on. What you do with the Friends as far as involvement is totally up to you. Okay. I think the magazines and the newsletter make worth the $35 membership. But, and the reason I asked about Hawaii is because that's the only state that we don't have members in. Now we have members in the other 49 from most of the provinces in Canada, from Mexico. We even have, we have members that live in Europe. We have a couple members that live in Australia and New Zealand even. Yeah, so, but we haven't been able to find anybody from Hawaii yet. So anyway, but if you'd like to talk to about membership, I'd be glad to sit down and talk to you about it. Easiest thing to do is just go on the website for the East Broad, Friends of the East Broad Top, all kinds of information there on membership. And if you're not computer literate, which I imagine you four really are, probably a lot more computer literate than I am, you can go stop at in the gift shop, and they have membership brochures there to fill out. Okay. Now, as we leave, we're going to go right straight back to the station, but the doors on either side are open. The blacksmith shop's on the left, the foundry's on the right. Neither one of those buildings are open yet. We're still cleaning them up from the 1960s. And but you're welcome to take a look inside to see what a foundry and a blacksmith shop would look like. Okay? Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you for your
so much.
Excuse me.
I haven't gotten done because I ate a little dirt or grease in my life. I'm good. I really tasted your oil out of your eye.
When I was getting paid to work, I was a school teacher, okay? So I can't pass up the opportunity to give a test. Any of you tell me what that is?
Some kind of linkage.
I'm going to say a link for Lincoln Pin.
You're exactly right. The gentleman from North Carolina wins the prize, okay? Before they used knuckle couplers to hook up cars, they used what was called a Lincoln pin system, and this is the link. This would go into the front car, drop a pin down through here. This would go into the car behind it, drop a pin down through here. The two of them are hooked up. It was the most dangerous job on the railroad.
Usually I'll lose a finger.
Yeah, most of the people that did it looked like this.
Boulders.
Okay, and there were actually railroads that they'd have hiring sessions, and they'd ask everybody to hold up their hand. If you held up your hand and you looked like that, you didn't get a job because you were a rookie. This guy was experienced. He got hired first.
Makes sense, because you probably wasn't going to make the same mistake twice.
That's right.
And if you did,
It's already on the fingers that are
They didn't
gone.
look like this.
The finger's not there to catch anymore.
That's right.
That's so cool.
That is true, yeah.
Unless it was 11. I thought it was 11. Was it 11 kickstands up? I thought it was 11. 11, 11:30. I thought it was 11:30. That would be about right. I saw an Indian. I'm pretty sure they said it was kickstands up to 11:30. But we didn't want to wait till the 1:30 ride because of time to get back.
Sir, if this is okay if I take a piece of coal for a souvenir?
Sure, go ahead.
It's a wild looking one. Look at that stuff.
Oh, you're getting Christmas this year.
That's fine. Last year I got a rock too. Hey, my friend this farmer was the first one.
How do you come up? Before it was mined on the block.
This was manufactured.
No, it was mined in West Virginia. We get our coal that we use today comes from West Virginia.
During the end of the shop tour, you probably heard EBT 16's whistle. That was her warning that she was approaching the station. And speaking of locomotive number 16, here she comes. EBT 16 runs the wide to turn around. Before returning to the station, they have to stop the train, as the main crossing they have does not have any gates, so they have to flag the crossing. Here's a brief history of locomotive number 16. Locomotive number 16 was built in 1916 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Entering the age of the modern steam locomotive in 1916, the EBT received its first of 3 large Mikados. And like the previous 3 smaller locomotives, number 16 came with superheaters, piston valves, and southern valve gear. One story mentions that 16 pulled 60 empty hoppers from Mount Union to Rock Hill in one train, literally clearing out the yard. Number 16 underwent an overhaul in 1955 and made only a handful of trips in 1956 before the railroad shut its doors. On February 1st of 2023, the locomotive returned to service.
every moment, not the least. The whistle blows, the engines roar as we chase the trains wanting more. Rusty rails, productions, where every journey is a thrill. Railfanning, adventures, our passion that we fulfill. Through valleys and over hills, our love for trains gives us chills. In the world of steel and steam, we find our passion, our dream. Rusty rails, productions, where every journey is a thrill. Whoa. Railfanning, adventures, our passion that we fulfill. Rusty rails, productions, all born for adventures untold. Railfanning, with passion, our love for trains never grows old.
Thanks for watching. I hope you liked what you saw. If you did, please give the video a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell to be notified about future uploads. Also, join our Discord. Link is down in the description down below, and channel memberships are now active. You can join by the join button or the link in the description down below. And we hope to see you along the rusty rails really soon.